The easiest way to lose everything is to mistake a person's appearance for their worth. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers, where polished marble reflected the glow of cameras and the quiet confidence of America's most influential executives. Waiters moved gracefully between tables, conversations floated through the air, and every smile seemed carefully rehearsed for the press. At the center of it all stood Victoria Langford, the celebrated CEO of Langford Robotics, greeting investors one by one with the effortless poise of a woman who believed success had finally answered every question life could ask. One handshake followed another, one photograph after another. Millions of dollars rested inside those brief moments of eye contact and polished introductions. Then the line reached Marcus Ellison. His navy sport coat had seen better years. His shoes were clean but worn. A simple silver wedding band still rested on his finger, although his wife had been gone for years. He carried himself without hurry, without apology, the quiet posture of a man who had learned that dignity never needed permission. He extended his hand with a warm, respectful smile. "Good evening, Ms. Langford." Victoria's eyes drifted from his face to his hand, then to the conference badge hanging from his neck. Her smile disappeared almost instantly. Without saying a word at first, she folded both hands neatly in front of herself instead of accepting his greeting. A faint murmur spread through the crowd. One executive raised an eyebrow. Another exchanged an amused glance with a colleague. Victoria finally spoke, her voice calm enough to sound polite yet sharp enough to leave no doubt.
"I'm sorry.
I prefer to shake hands with principal investors." A few quiet laughs escaped from nearby guests. Camera flashes continued popping as though nothing unusual had happened, but the air itself seemed to hesitate. Marcus slowly lowered his hand. Not a flicker of anger crossed his face. Not embarrassment. Not resentment. Only a peaceful expression that somehow made the laughter feel smaller than it had a second earlier. "I understand," he replied softly. "I hope your evening goes well." He stepped aside, allowing the next guest to move forward, while Victoria resumed greeting powerful names with polished confidence. No one noticed the discreet message appearing on a phone across the ballroom. No one realized the man walking toward the exit wasn't simply another overlooked guest. And no one in that glittering room understood that before the next sunrise, one quiet decision made by the black single father they had dismissed would erase $500 million from the future they were celebrating tonight. The cool night air wrapped around Marcus Ellison as he stepped onto the sidewalk outside the hotel, leaving behind the glittering ballroom without looking back once. Behind the glass walls, the celebration continued, filled with laughter, expensive champagne, and confident predictions about a future that everyone inside believed was already guaranteed. Marcus simply slipped his hands into the pockets of his jacket and walked toward a quiet parking garage where an aging dark blue pickup truck waited beneath a flickering light. It was not the kind of vehicle anyone expected to belong to a man connected to hundreds of millions of dollars, and that was exactly how he preferred it. His phone buzzed softly. The screen displayed a single message from his 12-year-old daughter. "Did your meeting go okay, Dad?" A gentle smile appeared on his face. He pressed the call button. "Hey, Ava." Her cheerful voice instantly brightened the evening. "Are you finished already?" "I am." "Did you make new friends?" Marcus laughed quietly. "Not exactly." There was a brief silence before she asked the question only a child would think to ask. "Did you still treat everyone kindly?" Marcus rested one hand on the steering wheel before answering. "Always." 20 minutes later, he pulled into a modest brick townhouse in a peaceful neighborhood outside the city. The porch light was still on. Ava opened the front door before he even reached it. She threw her arms around him, and he hugged her tightly, grateful that home had never cared about titles or balance sheets. The smell of homemade tomato soup filled the kitchen. School books covered half the dining table beside a science project that was still unfinished. Marcus loosened his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and sat beside his daughter with the patience that had become the rhythm of his life since losing his wife years earlier. "Can you help me with fractions?" she asked. "I thought you were the teacher." "Only after dinner," he replied with a grin. They ate together, talking about her basketball practice, an upcoming history quiz, and the stray golden retriever that kept visiting the neighborhood. Not once did Marcus mention the ballroom or the handshake that never happened. Ava suddenly looked at him with thoughtful eyes. "Dad, why do you always say respect is worth more than money?" Marcus placed his spoon on the table. "Because money can build a company, sweetheart. Respect is what keeps it standing." She nodded slowly as though storing the sentence somewhere she would need later in life. After she went upstairs to finish her homework, Marcus washed the dishes in silence while the kitchen clock ticked steadily beside him. Only then did his phone vibrate again. This time the caller identification displayed the name Ethan Brooks, Chief Operating Officer of Ellison Capital Partners. Marcus dried his hands, answered calmly, and listened without interrupting. Ethan spoke only one sentence. "The legal documents are ready whenever you give the word." Marcus looked through the window toward the soft glow from Ava's bedroom. His voice remained as steady as ever. "Hold everything until morning. Tonight belongs to my daughter. Tomorrow we will make a business decision. Nothing more, nothing less." The following morning arrived with the quiet confidence of ordinary routines. Sunlight slipped through the kitchen windows as Marcus packed Ava's lunch, carefully placing a handwritten note beside her apple, just as he had every school day for the past 7 years. She smiled when she found it. "You always write the same thing," she teased. Marcus chuckled while zipping her backpack. "Because it is always true." She unfolded the small card and read the familiar words aloud. "Kindness is never wasted." She looked up. "I will remember." After dropping Ava at school, Marcus drove across town, not to a towering headquarters with his name engraved across the entrance, but to a quiet brick building with no sign other than a discreet silver plaque that read Ellison Capital Partners. The receptionist greeted him with a warm smile instead of nervous formality. "Good morning, Mr. Ellison." "Good morning, Denise. How is your grandson doing?" Her face brightened immediately. "His asthma is finally improving. Thank you for asking." Marcus nodded and continued toward the conference room where Ethan Brooks and several senior partners were already waiting. A large display covered one wall. At its center appeared the words Langford Robotics Strategic Investment, followed by one unmistakable number, $500 million. Thick folders rested neatly at every chair. Financial forecasts, legal agreements, engineering assessments, and months of careful negotiations filled hundreds of pages. Ethan stood as Marcus entered. "Everything is ready for your signature. The board voted unanimously last night. Once you approve, the funds will be transferred before the market opens tomorrow." Marcus quietly took his seat but did not reach for the documents. Instead, he studied photographs displayed beside the financial reports. Engineers working late. Factory employees assembling precision equipment. Young interns celebrating new patents. Thousands of ordinary people depended on the decisions made inside this room. One partner cleared his throat. "Our analysts still believe the investment has strong long-term potential." Another added, "Financially, this remains one of the best opportunities this quarter." Marcus listened without interruption. Then he asked a question no spreadsheet could answer. "Tell me about the leadership." The room became noticeably quieter. Ethan exchanged a careful glance with the legal director before answering. "Technically impressive, aggressive, exceptionally ambitious." Marcus waited. "And?" Ethan finally spoke with complete honesty. "There have been concerns about executive culture. Several former employees described it as highly selective about who receives respect." Marcus folded his hands. The room fell still except for the soft hum of the projector. No one mentioned the previous evening. No one needed to. Marcus looked toward the skyline beyond the conference room windows, where sunlight reflected from the glass tower that housed Langford Robotics. "A company does not fail because it runs out of money," he said quietly. "It fails when leadership forgets the value of people." Every pen stopped moving. Every eye remained fixed on him. Marcus slowly closed the investment folder without signing a single page. The sound of the cover meeting the table was almost silent, yet somehow it echoed through the room louder than any speech. No one spoke for several long seconds after Marcus closed the folder. The quiet inside the conference room felt heavier than any argument. Ethan Brooks finally leaned forward. "Would you like us to renegotiate the terms?" Marcus slowly shook his head.
No.
Another partner adjusted her glasses. "Perhaps we should request additional governance protections." Marcus looked around the table, meeting every pair of eyes with the same calm expression. Respect cannot be negotiated into a contract. It has to exist before the contract is written. The room settled into thoughtful silence again. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city continued moving without the slightest idea that one decision inside an unmarked building could change the direction of an entire public company. Marcus reached for a single sheet of paper instead of the investment agreement. It was only 1 page long. At the top were 6 words: "Notice of withdrawal of investment proposal." He picked up his pen without hesitation. The signature took less than 5 seconds. Months of negotiations ended with one quiet movement of blue ink. Ethan accepted the document carefully, almost respectfully. "Should I notify Langford Robotics immediately?" Marcus nodded once. "Yes. Send the letter through legal counsel. Keep it professional.
No interviews. No statements.
No explanations beyond the facts." "Understood." Marcus stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, he paused. "Remember something." Everyone looked up. "We are not punishing a company. We are protecting the values that decide where our capital belongs." Then he quietly left the room. Across downtown, the atmosphere inside Langford Robotics could not have been more different. Bright television screens displayed enthusiastic financial coverage, while assistants hurried through polished hallways carrying presentation folders and celebration schedules. Victoria Langford entered the executive boardroom with the confidence of someone expecting another successful day. "Has legal confirmed tomorrow's signing ceremony?" she asked. Her chief financial officer smiled. "Everything appears to be on schedule. Analysts are already predicting record growth after the investment closes." Another executive added, "Our stock is already climbing on market expectations alone." Victoria glanced through the glass wall overlooking hundreds of employees working below. "Good. Let us stay focused. Success belongs to those who expect it." Her assistant entered carrying a silver tray stacked with correspondence received that morning. Most of the envelopes contained invitations, partnership requests, and congratulatory letters. One plain white envelope rested quietly beneath the others without any company logo or decorative seal. "This arrived by courier 15 minutes ago," the assistant said. "Marked urgent from Ellison Capital Partners." Victoria barely looked at it. "Leave it there. We will review it after lunch." The assistant placed the envelope beside her tablet and stepped away. No one around the polished conference table paid any attention to the ordinary white paper lying among documents worth billions of dollars. Outside, the morning sun reflected brilliantly across the glass towers of the financial district. Inside that untouched envelope waited a single decision that would quietly begin changing every future they had celebrated only hours before. Lunch came and went before anyone remembered the plain white envelope resting quietly beside Victoria Langford's tablet. The executive meeting had stretched longer than expected as department heads celebrated projected expansion, new hiring plans, and ambitious revenue goals built around funding that everyone believed was only hours away. Finally, Victoria reached for the unopened envelope almost absent-mindedly. She slid a letter opener beneath the seal and unfolded a single page. Her confident expression did not change at first. Then her eyes slowed. She read the first paragraph again. The room gradually fell silent as she continued reading every line without speaking. Her chief financial officer leaned forward.
"Victoria."
She lowered the paper carefully onto the polished conference table. "The investment has been withdrawn." Nobody answered. One executive blinked in disbelief. Another laughed nervously as though expecting the announcement to be part of an unusual joke. "Withdrawn?" someone finally asked. "There has to be a misunderstanding." The legal counsel reached for the letter with permission and read every sentence aloud. The language was respectful, precise, and completely final. Ellison Capital Partners had decided not to proceed with the proposed $500 million investment after completing its internal review.
No acquiesctions.
No emotional language. No public criticism. Only a professional conclusion that all negotiations had ended effective immediately. The room remained perfectly still. The soft hum of the air conditioning suddenly sounded louder than the voices that had filled the boardroom only moments earlier. Victoria stood and walked toward the windows overlooking the city skyline. "Call them," she said quietly. Immediately, her assistant dialed every available number. The receptionist answered politely. "Ellison Capital Partners. How may I help you?" "This is Victoria Langford. I need to speak with Mr. Marcus Ellison." There was a brief pause before the receptionist replied with calm professionalism. "I am sorry. Mr. Ellison is unavailable this afternoon. Tell him it is urgent. I will gladly deliver your message. When will he return my call?" Another pause followed. "I cannot promise a time, ma'am." The call ended. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Within the hour, financial reporters began noticing unusual activity. Market analysts questioned whether the long-rumored investment had been delayed. Industry newsletters published cautious updates. Television anchors softened their earlier optimism, replacing certainty with speculation. By late afternoon, Langford Robotics stock began slipping as investors searched for answers that no one inside the company could yet provide. In another part of the city, Marcus sat quietly in the wooden bleachers of Ava's middle school gymnasium, applauding as students presented their science fair projects. His phone vibrated several times inside his jacket pocket. He glanced at the screen only once. Missed calls. Voicemails.
Urgent request.
He pressed the silent button without listening to any of them. Ava proudly carried her project toward him with a wide smile. "Dad, I won second place." Marcus stood, hugged her warmly, and smiled with genuine joy. "I knew you would do your best." At that moment, surrounded by children, teachers, and proud families, $500 million mattered less to him than one small ribbon held in his daughter's hands. While across downtown, an entire boardroom struggled to understand how one quiet decision had begun unraveling the future they believed could never change. The next morning, the opening bell on Wall Street rang with its usual confidence. But inside Langford Robotics, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Television screens that had celebrated the company's momentum only a day before now displayed cautious headlines. Analysts questioned the missing investment. Financial reporters searched for confirmation. Investors began asking the same simple question that no executive could answer. What changed? Victoria Langford stood at the head of another emergency meeting, her usual confidence replaced by careful restraint. "Update me," she said. The chief financial officer looked exhausted despite the early hour. "3 institutional investors have delayed their commitments until they understand why Ellison Capital Partners walked away." Another executive added, "2 major suppliers are requesting revised payment guarantees before expanding production." The legal director quietly slid another folder across the table. "Our lenders have requested a conference call this afternoon." No one interrupted. Every new report seemed heavier than the one before it. Victoria stared at the financial dashboard projected across the wall. The numbers were not catastrophic yet, but they were moving in the wrong direction. Confidence, she realized, disappeared much faster than it was built. She took a slow breath. "Has anyone reached Mr. Ellison?" Her assistant lowered her eyes. "Every request has received the same professional response. He is unavailable." The room became silent again. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus arrived at Ellison Capital Partners carrying nothing more than a travel mug of coffee and a worn leather notebook. Employees greeted him by name. Junior analysts stopped to ask questions. He listened patiently to every one of them. No raised voice.
No celebration. No satisfaction.
Ethan Brooks joined him outside his office. "The market reaction has accelerated faster than expected." Marcus nodded calmly. Fear usually travels faster than facts. Ethan hesitated before asking the question everyone inside the firm had quietly wondered. Do you regret the decision? Marcus looked through the window toward the busy streets below where thousands of people hurried to work without knowing how many lives depended on invisible decisions made in offices above them. I regret that good employees may carry the burden of poor leadership, he answered softly. But our responsibility is to invest where character is as dependable as profit. Ethan remained quiet. Marcus continued. Capital follows trust. Once trust begins to crack, money eventually notices. At that same moment, a national business network aired an interview with an industry analyst. Ellison Capital has one of the strongest due diligence records in the country, the analyst explained. When they withdraw from a deal this late, the market assumes they discovered something important, even if nothing has been publicly disclosed. Within minutes, the company's share price slipped again. Phones rang continuously inside Langford Robotics. Investor relations struggled to reassure nervous shareholders. Department managers answered worried questions from employees who had spent years building products they still believed in. Victoria watched the activity through the glass walls of her office. For the first time in years, she was not afraid of losing money. She was afraid of losing credibility. Then her assistant entered quietly carrying a slim folder. We finally received the background report you requested on Marcus Ellison. Victoria opened it without speaking. Her eyes stopped on the first page, and the color slowly faded from her face. Victoria lowered herself into her chair without realizing she had stopped breathing. The first page contained a simple photograph of Marcus Ellison standing beside his daughter at a community scholarship fundraiser, both smiling beneath a banner that read Investing in Tomorrow. She turned the page. Founder and Managing Partner, Ellison Capital Partners. Assets under management exceeding $18 billion. Lead investor in dozens of America's fastest-growing companies. National Philanthropy Award recipient. Board member of 3 educational foundations. Her eyes continued moving across the report, but every new paragraph only deepened the silence inside her office. There was no scandal.
No arrogance. No headlines celebrating personal bealt.
Every accomplishment seemed connected to schools, veterans, medical research, or scholarships for children who could not afford college. She whispered almost to herself, "Why did nobody tell me?" Her assistant answered carefully, "Everyone assumed you already knew who he was." Victoria closed the folder and remembered the moment in the ballroom with painful clarity. The hand she had refused. The calm voice that wished her a pleasant evening. The absence of anger. It had not been weakness. It had been discipline. Down the hallway, the emergency board meeting resumed. Directors, attorneys, and financial advisors filled every chair. The atmosphere that once carried excitement now felt heavy with uncertainty. Victoria entered quietly carrying the background report. "There is something all of you need to see." She placed the folder in the center of the table. One by one, the directors read the first pages. Expressions changed almost immediately. One senior board member slowly removed his glasses. Another leaned back without saying a word. Finally, the oldest director broke the silence. "Marcus Ellison?" He looked toward Victoria. "You met him personally?" She nodded once. "Briefly. And you did not recognize him?"
No.
Another director asked the question no one wanted to hear. "How did the meeting go?" Victoria hesitated for several seconds before answering honestly. "I made a serious mistake." No one pressed her further. They no longer needed details. The timing of the withdrawn investment suddenly made perfect sense. Across the city, Marcus spent the afternoon visiting a public charter school funded through one of his foundations. Children gathered around him with science projects and handmade thank you cards. He listened to every presentation with genuine attention, asking thoughtful questions and encouraging even the shyest students to believe in themselves. A little boy tugged gently on his sleeve. "Mr. Ellison, why do you help schools so much?" Marcus smiled warmly before kneeling to meet him at eye level. "Because someone believed in me before I believed in myself." The principal watched quietly from across the classroom. There were no television cameras.
No reporters. No photographers.
Just a man investing in futures that could never be measured on a stock exchange. Back inside Langford Robotics, Another call came from a major institutional shareholder, requesting an emergency explanation for the failed investment. Victoria stared once more at Marcus's photograph resting on the conference table. For the first time in her career, she realized she had not lost $500 million because of one business decision. She had lost it the moment she chose to judge a man before learning his name. The following morning, before the city had fully awakened, a black sedan pulled quietly into the visitor parking lot outside Ellison Capital Partners. Victoria Langford stepped out alone, wearing a simple navy suit with no photographers, no executive entourage, and no trace of the polished confidence that had once filled every room she entered. She paused for a long moment before walking through the glass doors. The receptionist recognized her immediately and greeted her with professional courtesy. "Good morning, Ms. Langford." Victoria offered a small, sincere smile. "Good morning. I understand Mr. Ellison may not wish to see me, but I would appreciate the opportunity if he has even 5 minutes." The receptionist made a brief phone call before looking back up. "Please have a seat." 10 quiet minutes passed beneath the soft hum of the lobby lights. Employees came and went carrying coffee, greeting one another by name, thanking the maintenance staff, holding doors open for visitors. Victoria noticed something unusual. No one seemed impressed by titles. They seemed impressed by kindness. Finally, the receptionist stood. "Mr. Ellison will see you now." Victoria followed her down a simple hallway until she reached an office with large windows overlooking the city park. Marcus stood beside a bookshelf arranging children's drawings into matching frames. He turned with the same calm expression she remembered from the ballroom. "Good morning, Ms. Langford." She looked at him for a moment before quietly lowering her eyes. "Thank you for seeing me." Marcus gestured toward a chair. "Please." Neither of them spoke for several seconds. The silence felt uncomfortable at first, then strangely honest. Victoria finally broke it. "I did not come to ask for the investment." Marcus listened without interrupting. "I came because I owe you an apology." He remained still. "That evening," she continued, "I judged you before learning who you were. I looked at your clothes instead of your character. I cannot undo that moment, but I can admit that I was wrong." Marcus nodded gently, neither accepting nor rejecting her words. "Thank you for saying that."
Victoria swallowed carefully.
"When I learned everything you have done for schools, veterans, and families, I realized I had mistaken humility for insignificance." Marcus walked toward the window where children laughed together in the park below. "People often confuse quiet with weakness," he said softly. "They rarely discover the difference until it costs them something valuable." Victoria joined him near the window. "It cost me much more than money." Marcus looked toward the framed drawing resting on his desk. It showed a father, holding the hand of a little girl beneath bright yellow sunshine. In the corner, written in careful handwriting, were the words, "My dad is my hero." He smiled warmly. "Every evening my daughter asks me one question."
Victoria waited.
She asks whether I treated people kindly that day. His voice remained calm. "One day she will run a company of her own. I hope she never believes success gives her permission to overlook someone's dignity." Victoria felt tears gather in her eyes, not from humiliation, but from understanding. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she extended her hand. "May I ask for the handshake I should have accepted the first time?" Marcus looked at her hand for only a moment before meeting her eyes. Then, with quiet grace and without the slightest trace of resentment, he reached forward and gently shook it. Marcus released the handshake with the same quiet composure that had carried him through every moment of misunderstanding. Neither victory nor resentment appeared on his face. Only peace. Victoria lowered her hand slowly, realizing that forgiveness was never something money could purchase, could only be received with humility. "Thank you," she whispered. Marcus smiled gently. "The apology mattered more than you know." She looked around his office one last time. There were no trophies displayed behind his desk. No oversized photographs celebrating billion-dollar deals. Instead, she saw children's artwork, family pictures, and handwritten letters from students whose lives had been changed through scholarships. Success suddenly looked very different from everything she had spent years chasing. Before leaving, Victoria paused at the doorway. If circumstances were different, would you ever consider working with our company again? Marcus thought for a moment before answering. Investment has never been only about numbers. It has always been about trust. Trust takes years to build, seconds to lose, and patience to restore. She nodded with complete understanding. Then I have work to do. Over the following months, Langford Robotics changed in ways that could not be measured only by quarterly reports. Victoria introduced leadership training centered on respect, humility, and service. Anonymous employee feedback became part of every executive evaluation. Managers were expected to mentor young employees instead of simply directing them. Small acts of kindness slowly replaced the culture of appearances. The transformation did not happen overnight, but people noticed. Confidence returned one conversation at a time. Trust returned one decision at a time. Marcus never reconsidered the original investment, yet he quietly encouraged other responsible investors to evaluate the company's progress fairly once genuine changes became visible. He believed redemption should be earned, not denied forever. One Saturday afternoon, Ava walked beside her father through the same city park outside his office, holding an ice cream cone while autumn leaves drifted gently across the path. She looked up with curious eyes. "Dad, did everything work out?" Marcus smiled as they continued walking beneath the golden trees. "Not exactly the way anyone expected." She thought for a moment before asking another question. "Why did you forgive her?" Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "Because carrying bitterness teaches the wrong lesson. Carrying dignity teaches the right one." Ava smiled and rested her head lightly against his arm. The afternoon breeze rustled through the trees as families laughed nearby and children chased one another across the grass. In that quiet moment, Marcus understood that the greatest wealth he would ever leave behind would never appear on a balance sheet. It would live inside the values his daughter carried into the world. And somewhere across the city, a leader who had once measured people by status had finally learned to measure them by character, leaving one simple handshake to echo far longer than $500 million ever could.